Let's read this article from Alberta Sasquatch. Bigfoot in Canadian Rocky Mountains. Alberta Sasquatch Organization is a small group of knowledgeable Bigfoot enthusiasts who have made it our mission to chronicle the existence of the creature known as Sasquatch in the province of Alberta, Canada. Here you will find a wealth of eyewitness sightings and our reports on encounters in locations including Banff, Jasper, Nordig, Waterton, Kananaskis, and all across our great province. Now, I live in Ohio, but it doesn't matter because it's really. This is an article from March 5th, 2018, Albert Ostman's abduction. Now, most people who have spent any time with researching Bigfoot, you heard of the story, but let's hear it again. I think one of the more interesting aspects of the tale of Sasquatch Bigfoot is human abductions and strange things that happen to come along with it. Let's hear what allegedly they say that the story. I have always followed logging and construction work. At this time, I had worked over 1 year on a construction job. I thought a good vacation was in order. BC is famous for lost gold mines. So I'm assuming this is Albert speaking. It's not in quotes though, so. One is supposed to be at the head of Tuba Inlet. Why not look for this mine and have a vacation at the same time? I took the Union steamship boat to Lud, BC. From there, I hired an old Indian to take me to the head of Tuba Inlet. This old Indian was a very talkative old gentleman. He told me stories about gold brought out by a white man from this lost mine. This white man was a very heavy drinker and spent his money freely in saloons, but he had no problem in getting more money. He would be away a few days, then come back with a bag of gold. But one time he went to his mine and never came back. Some people said Sasquatch had killed him. At that time, I had never heard of Sasquatch, so I asked what kind of an animal he called Sasquatch. The Indian said they have hair all over their bodies. That's a little different from the last video that I just shared for the Sasquatch from Romania, because his stomach didn't have hair all over his body. But they are not animals. They are people, big people, living in the mountains. My uncle saw the tracks of one that were 2 feet long. One old Indian saw one over 8 feet tall. I told the Indian I didn't believe in their old fables about the mountain giants. It might have been some thousands of years ago, but not nowadays. The Indian said, there might not be many, but they still exist. We arrived at the head of the inlet about 4 p.m. I made camp at the mouth of the creek. The Indian had supper with me. I told him to look out for me. In about 3 weeks, I would be camping at the same spot when I came back. Next morning, I took my rifle with me, but left my equipment at the camp. I decided to look around for some deer trail to lead me up into the mountains. On the way up, the inlet, I seen a pass in the mountain that I wanted to go through. to see what was on the other side. I spent most of the forenoon, I guess, or afternoon, but it says forenoon, looking for a trail, but found none, except for a hogback rundown to the beach. Not sure what that means. So I swapped out a trail from there. I swamped out a trail from there, got back to my camp about 3 p.m. that afternoon, and made up my pack to be ready in the morning. My equipment consisted of one 30-30 Winchester rifle. I had a special homemade prospecting pick, axe on one end, pick on the other. I had a leather case for the pick, which fashioned to my belt. Also my sheath knife. The storekeeper at Lund was cooperative. He gave me some cans for my sugar, salt, and matches to keep them dry. My grub consists mostly of canned stuff, except for a side of bacon and a bag of beans and 4 pounds of prunes and 6 packs of macaroni cheese, 3 pounds of pancake flour and 6 packets of Rye King hardtack, 3 rolls of snuff. Man, he remembers all this detail after all the time. 1 quart sealer of butter and 2 1-pound cans of milk. I had 2 boxes of shells for my rifle. Who would remember all that? I certainly wouldn't. It's very observant of him, at least. The storekeeper gave me a biscuit, a tin. I put a few things in that and cached it under a windfall, so I would have it when I came back here, waiting for a boat to bring me out. My sleeping bag I rolled up and tied to the top of my back sack, together with my ground sheet, small frying pan, 1 aluminum pot that held about a gallon. As my canned food was used, it would get plenty of empty cans to cook with. The following morning I had an early breakfast, made up my pack, started out up the hogback. My pack must have been at least 80 pounds besides my rifle. That's a lot of weight to be hauling around. He doesn't look like that big of a guy either. It must have been a strong son of a gun. After 1 hour, I had to rest. I kept resting and climbing all morning, and about 2 p.m., I came to a flat place below a rock bluff. There was a bunch of willow in one place, and they made a wooden stabe, I guess as you pronounce stabe, and started digging for water. About a foot down, I got seepings of water, so I decided to camp here for the night. Scout around for the best place to get on from here. I must have been up to near 1,000 feet. There was a most beautiful view over the islands and the strait. As you had a lot of time to think about this too, right? So tugboats with log booms and fishing boats going in all directions. A lovely spot. I spent the following days prospecting around, but no signs of minerals. I found a deer trail leading towards this pass that I had seen on my way up the inlet. The following morning, I started out early, and while it was cool, it was steep climbing with my heavy pack. After 3 hours climb, I was tired and stopped to rest. I think most of us would be tired long before. Yeah, it must be pretty tough. On the other side of a ravine, from where I was resting, was a yellow spot below some small trees. I moved over there and started digging for water. I found a small spring and made a small trough from cedar bark and got a small amount of water. Had my lunch and rested here till evening. I made it over the pass late that night. Now I had downhill and good going, but I was hungry and tired, so I camped at the first bunch of trees I came to. Them damn trees. Gotta always be careful of them damn trees. I was trying to size up the terrain, what direction I would take from here. Towards west would lead to low land and some other inlet, so I decided to go in a northeast direction. I had good going and slight downhill all day. I must have made 10 miles when I came to a small spring and a big black hemlock tree. Big black hemlock tree. Big. You recognize the tree. This was a lovely campsite. I spent 2 days here just resting and prospecting. First night here, I shot a small deer. 2 days later, I found an exceptionally good campsite. It was 2 good-sized cypress trees growing close together and near a rock wall with a nice spring just below these trees. I intended to make this my permanent camp. I cut lots of brush for my bed between these trees. I rigged up a pole from this rock wall to hang my backpack on, and arranged some flat rocks for my fireplace for cooking. I had a really classy setup, and that is when things began to happen. I was a heavy sleeper. Not much disturbs me after I go to sleep, especially on a good bed like I had now. And the next morning I noticed things had been disturbed during the night, but nothing missing I could see. I roasted my grouse on a stick for breakfast. That night I filled up the magazine of my rifle. I still had one full box of 20 shells and 6 shells in my coat pocket. That night I laid my rifle under the edge of my sleeping bag. I thought a porcupine had visited me the night before, and porkies like leather, so I put my shoes in the bottom of my sleeping bag. Next morning my pack sack had been emptied out. Someone had turned the sack upside down. It was still hanging on a pole from the shoulder straps as I had hung it up. Then I noticed 1/2 pound package of prunes was missing. Also my pancake flour was missing, but my salt bag was not touched. Porkies always look for salt, so I decided it must be something else than porkies. I looked for tracks but found none. I did not think it was a bear. They always tear up and make a mess of things. I kept close to the camp these days in case this visitor would come back. I climbed up a big rock where I had a good view of the camp, but nothing showed up. I was hoping it would be a porky, so I would get a good porky stew. These visits had now been going on for 3 nights. This night it was cloudy and looked like it might rain. I took special notice of how everything was arranged. I closed my pack sack. I did not undress. I only took off my shoes, put them in the bottom of my sleeping bag. I drove my prospecting pick into one of the cypress trees so I could reach it from my bed. I also put the rifle alongside me inside my sleeping bag. I fully intended to stay awake all night to find out who my visitor was, but I must have fallen asleep. I was awakened by something picking me up. I was half asleep, and at first I did not remember where I was. As I began to get my wits together, I remember I was on this prospecting trip and in my sleeping bag. My first thought was, it must be a snowslide, but there was no snow around my camp. Then I felt like I was tossed on horseback, but I could feel whoever it was walking. I tried to reason out what kind of animal this could be. I tried to get my sheath knife and cut my way out, but I was in an almost sitting position, and the knife was under me. I could not get a hold of it, but my rifle was in front of me. I had a good hold on that and had no intentions to let go of it. At times I could feel my pack sack touching me. And could feel the cans and the sack touching my back. Okay, that's what you say. After what seemed like an hour, I could feel we were going up a steep hill. I could feel myself rise for every foot. What was carrying me was breathing hard and sometimes gave a slight cough. Now I knew this must be one of the mountain Sasquatch giants the Indian told me about. Isn't this interesting? And he was dismissing it when he was talking to the Indian, and he ended up having it happen to him. I was in a very uncomfortable position, unable to move. I was sitting on my feet, and one of the boots in the bottom of the bag was crossways with a hobnail sole up across my foot. It hurt me terribly, but I could not move. It was very hot inside. It was lucky for me this fellow's hands was not big enough to close up the whole bag when he picked me up. There was a small opening at the top, otherwise I would have choked to death. Now he was going downhill. I could feel myself touching the ground at times, and at one time he dragged me behind him, and I could feel he was below me. Then he seemed to get on level ground and was going at a trot for a long time. By this time I had cramps in my legs. The pain was terrible. I was wishing he would get to his destination soon. I could not stand this type of transportation much longer. Now he was going uphill again. It did not hurt me so bad. I tried to estimate the distance and directions. As near as I could guess, we were about 3 hours traveling. I don't know how you would figure that one out. I had no idea when he started as I was asleep when he picked me up. Finally, he stopped and let me down. Then he dropped my backpack. I could hear the cans rattle. Then I heard chatter, some kind of talk I didn't understand. The ground sloping, so when he let go of my sleeping bag, I rolled downhill. I got my head out and got some air. I tried to straighten my legs and crawl up, but my legs were numb. God, that must have hurt like hell. It was still dark. I could not see what my captors looked like. I tried to massage my legs to get some life into them and get my shoes on. I could hear now it was at least 4 of them, and they were standing around me and cautiously chattering. I had never heard of Sasquatch before. The Indian told me about them, but I knew I was right among them. But how to get away from them? That was another question. I got to see the outline of them now as it began to get lighter. Though the sky was cloudy, it looked like rain. In fact, there was a slight sprinkle. I now had circulation in my legs, but my left foot was very sore on the top where it had been resting on my hobnail boots. I got my boots out from my sleeping bag and tried to stand up. I found that I was wobbly on my feet, but I had a good hold of my rifle. I asked, "What you fellows want with me?" Only some more chatter. It was getting lighter now. I could see them quite clearly. I could make out forms of 4 people, 2 big and 2 little ones. They were all covered with hair and no clothes on at all. I could now make out mountains all around me. I looked at my watch. It was 4:25 a.m. and it was getting lighter now, and I could see the people clearly. They looked like a family, old man, old lady, and 2 young ones, a boy and a girl. The boy and the girl seemed to be scared of me. The old lady did not seem too pleased about what the old man dragged home, but the old man was waving his arms and telling them all what he had in mind. They all left me then. I had my compass and my prospecting glass on strings around my neck. The compass in my left hand shirt pocket and my glass in my right hand pocket. I tried to reason our location, where I was. I could see now that I was in a small valley or basin about 8 or 10 acres, surrounded by high mountains. On the southeast side, there was a V-shaped opening about 8 feet wide at the top and about 20 feet high at the highest point. That must be the way I came in, but how will I get out? The old man was now sitting near this opening. I moved my belongings up close to the west wall. There were 2 small cypress trees there, and this will do for shelter for the time being. Until I find out what these people want with me and how to get away from here. I emptied out my back sack to see what I had left in the line of food. All my canned meat and vegetables were intact, and I had 1 can of coffee. Also 3 small cans of milk, 2 packs of Rye King, hard pack, and my butter sealer half full of butter. But my prunes and macaroni were missing. Also my full pack of shells for my rifle. I had my sheath knife but no prospecting pick. But my prospecting pick was missing and my can of matches. I only had my safety box full, and that held only about a dozen matches. That did not worry me. I can only start a fire with my prospecting glass when the sun is shining. If I got dry wood, I wanted hot coffee, but I had no wood. Also, nothing around here that looked like wood. I had a good look over the valley from where I was, but the boy and the girl were always watching me from behind some juniper bush. I decided there must be some water around here. The ground was leaning towards the opening in the wall. There must be water at the upper end of the valley. There is green grass and moss along the bottom. All my utensils were left behind. I opened my coffee tin and emptied the coffee in a dish towel and tried it with a metal strip from the can. I took my rifle and the can and went looking for water. Right ahead under the cliff there was a lovely spring that disappeared underground. I got a drink, a full can of water. When I got back, the young boy was looking over my belongings, but did not touch any. On my way back, I noticed where these people were sleeping. On the east side wall of the valley was a shelf in the mountainside with an overhanging rock, looking something like a big undercut and a big tree about 10 feet deep and 30 feet wide. The floor was covered with lots of dry moss, and they had some kind of blankets woven of narrow strips of cedar bark packed with dry moss. They looked very practical and warm, with no need of washing. The first day not much happened. I had to eat my food cold. The young fellow was coming nearer me and seemed curious about me. My one snuff box was empty, so I relayed it toward him. Relayed it, I guess, it toward him. When he saw it coming, he sprang up quick as a cat and grabbed it. He went over to his sister and showed her. They found out how to open and close it. They spent a long time playing with it. Then he trotted over to the old man and showed him. They had a long chatter. Next morning, I made my mind to leave this place. If I had to shoot my way out, I could not stay much longer. I had only enough grub to last me till I got back to Toba Inlet. I did not know the direction, but I would go downhill and would come out near civilization someplace. I rolled up my sleeping bag, put that inside my sack, and packed a few cans I had, swung the sack on my back, and ejected a shell in the barrel of my rifle and started for the opening in the wall. The old man got up and held up his hands as though he would push me back. I pointed to the opening. I wanted to go out, but he stood there pushing towards me and said something that sounded like suka suka or soka soka. That's right, it was soka soka. I backed up about 60 feet. I did not want to be too close. I thought if I had to shoot my way out, a 30-30 might not have much effect on this fellow. It might make him mad. I only had 6 shells, so I decided to wait. There must be a better way than killing him in order to get out of here. I went back to my campsite to figure out some other way to get out. I could make friends with the young fellow and girl. They might help me if I only could talk to them. Then I thought of a fellow who saved himself from a mad bull by blinding him with snuff in his eyes. But how will I get near enough to the fellow to put snuff in his eyes? So I decided next time I give the young fellow some snuff box to leave a few grains of snuff in it. He might give the old man a taste of it. But the question is, in what direction will I go? If I shall get out, I must have been near 25 miles northeast of Toba Inlet when I was kidnapped. This fellow must have traveled at least 25 miles in 3 hours. He carried me. If he went west, we would be near salt water. Same thing if he went south. Therefore, he must have gone northeast. If I then keep going south over 2 mountains, I must hit salt water someplace between Lund and Vancouver. The following day, I did not see the old lady till about 4 p.m. She came home with her arms full of grass, twigs, and of all kinds of spruce and hemlock, as well as some kind of nuts that grew in the ground. I have seen lots of them in Vancouver Island. The young fellow went up the mountain to the east every day. He could climb better than a mountain goat. He picked some kind of grass with long sweet roots and gave me some one day. They tasted very sweet. I gave him another snuff can with about a teaspoon of snuff in it. He tasted it. Then he went to the old man. He licked it with his tongue. He had a long chat. They had a long chat. I made a dipper from the milk can, and I made many dippers. You can use them for pots too. You cut 2 slits near the top of any can, and then cut a limb from any small tree, and cut back the limb down. Cut down back of the limb down to the stem of the tree. Then taper the part you must cut for the stem, excuse me. Then cut a hole in the tapered part. Slide the tapered part in a slit you have made in the can, and you have a good handle on your can. I threw one over to the young fellow that was playing near my camp. He picked it up and looked at it. Then he went to the old man and showed it to him. They had a long chatter, and then he came to me and pointed at the dipper, then at his sister. I could see that he wanted one for her too. I had 1 peas and carrots, so I made one for his sister. He was standing only 8 feet away from me when I had made the dipper. I dipped it in water and drank from it. He was very pleased, almost smiled at me. Then I took a chew of snuff and smacked my lips and said, "That's good." The young fellow pointed to the old man and said something that sounded like, okay. I got the idea that the old man liked snuff, and the young fellow wanted a box for the old man. I shook my head. I motioned with my hands for the old man to come to me. I don't think the young fellow understood what I meant. He went to his sister and gave her the dipper I made for her. They did not come near me again that day. I had now been here 6 days, but I was sure I was making progress. If only I could get the old man to come over to me, get him to eat a full box of snuff, that would kill him for sure. And that way kill him, and that way kill himself. I wouldn't be guilty of murder. Okay, the old lady was a meek old thing. The young fellow was, by this time, quite friendly. The girl would not hurt anybody. Her chest was flat like boys, no development like young ladies. I'm sure if I could get the old man out of the way, I could easily have brought this girl out with me to civilization. But what good would that have been? I would have to keep her in a cage for the public display. I don't think we have any right to force our way of life on other people. I don't think they would like it. The noise and racket of modern city they would not like any more than I do. The young fellow might have been between 11 and 18 years old and about 7 foot tall and might weigh about 300 pounds. His chest would be about 50 to 55 inches. His waist is about 36 to 38 inches. He had wide jaws and a narrow forehead that slanted upward around the back for about 4 or 5 inches higher than his shoulders. The hair on their heads was about 6 inches long. The hair on the rest of their body was short and thick in places. The woman's hair on the forehead had an upward turn like some women have. They call it bangs among women's hairdos. Nowadays, the old lady could have been anything between 40 and 70 years old. She was over 7 foot tall. She would be about 500 to 600 pounds. She had very wide hips and a goose-like walk. She was not built for beauty or speed. Some of those lovable braziers and uplifts would have been a great improvement on her looks and her figure. The men's eye teeth were longer than the rest of the teeth, but not long enough to be called tusks. The old man must have been near 8 feet tall, big barrel chest, and big bump on his back, powerful shoulders. His biceps on his upper arms were enormous and tapered down to his elbows. His forearms were larger than common people have, but well proportioned. His hands were wide. The palms was long and broad, hollow like a scoop. His fingers were short in proportion to the rest of his hand. Never thought of that. His fingernails were like chisels. The only place they had no hair was inside their hands and the soles of their feet, and the upper part of their nose and eyelids. I never did see their ears, and they were covered with hair hanging over them. See, and it's a little different from the alleged Sasquatch film in Romania, where if the old man were to wear a collar, it would have to be at least 30 inches. I have no idea what size shoes they would need. I was watching a young fellow's foot one day when he was sitting down. The soles of his feet seemed to be padded like a dog's foot, and the big toe was longer than the rest and very strong. In mountain climbing, all he needed was footing of his big toe. They were very agile. To sit down, they would turn their knees out and came straight down. To rise, they came straight up without help of hands or arms. I don't think this valley was their permanent home. I think they moved from place to place, as food is available in different localities. They might eat meat, but I never saw them eat meat or do any cooking. I think this was probably a stopover place, and the plants with sweet roots on the mountainside might have been in season this time of year. They seem to be most interested in them. The roots have a very sweet and satisfying taste. They always seem to do everything for a reason, waste no time on anything they did not need. When they were not looking for food, the old man and old lady were resting, but the boy and the girl were always climbing something or some other exercise. My favorite position was to take hold of his feet with his hands and balance on his rump. Then bounce forward. Oh, really? The idea seems to be to see how far he could go without his feet and hands touching the ground. Sometimes he made 20 feet. No kidding. That's quite an amazing thing right there. And that might explain why they have big butts. And that might, because they do have big butts. And those big padded butts, man, it's like it's got a lot of padding on it. It's like a bouncy ball kind of effect. Well, what do they want with me? They must understand I cannot stay here indefinitely. I will soon have to make a break for freedom. Not that I was mistreated in any way. One consolation was that the old man was coming closer each day and was very interested in my snuff. Watch me when I take a pinch of snuff. He seemed to think it useless to only put it inside his lips. One morning after I had my breakfast, both the old man and boy came and sat down only 10 feet away from me. This morning I made coffee, and I saved up all the dry branches I found and had some dry moss and used all the labels from cans to start a fire. I got my coffee pot boiling, and it was strong coffee too. The aroma from boiling coffee was what brought them over. I was sitting eating hardtack with plenty of butter on and sipping coffee. It sure tasted good. I was smacking my lips and pretending it was better than it really was. I set the can down, and that was about half full. I intended to warm it up later. I pulled out a full box of snuff and took a big chew. Before I had time to close the box, the old man reached for it. I was afraid he would waste it, and they only had 2 more boxes. So I held on the box, intending him to take a pinch like I had just done. Instead, he grabbed the box and emptied it in his mouth and swallowed it in one gulp. He licked the box inside with his tongue. After a few minutes, his eyes began to roll over in his head. He was looking straight up, and I could see he was sick. Then he grabbed my coffee can that was quite cold by that time, and he emptied that in his mouth, and grounds and all. That did no good. He stuck his head between his legs and rolled forward a few times away from me. Then he began to squeal like a stuck pig. I grabbed my rifle. I said to myself, "This is it. If he comes for me, I will shoot him plumb between his eyes." But he started for the spring. He wanted water. I packed my sleeping bag in my pack sack with a few cans I had left. The young fellow ran over to his mother. Then she began to squeal. I started for the opening in the wall, and I just made it. The old lady was right behind me. I fired one shot at the rock over her head. I guess she had never seen a rifle fire before. She turned and ran inside the wall. I injected another shell in the barrel of my rifle and started downhill, looking back over my shoulder every so often to see if they were coming. I was in the canyon. And good traveling, I made fast time. Must have made 3 miles in some world record time. I came to a turn in the canyon. I had the sun on my left. That meant I was going south. The canyon turned west. I decided to climb the ridge ahead of me. I knew that I must have 2 mountain ridges between me and the salt water, and by climbing this ridge, I would have a good view of this canyon. Where am I at now? So I could see if the Sasquatch were coming after me. I had a light pack and was making good time up this hill. I stopped soon after to look back to where I came from, but nobody followed me. As I came over the ridge, I could see Mount Baker. Then I knew I was going in the right direction. I was hungry and tired. I opened my backpack to see what I had to eat. I decided to rest here for a while. I had a good view of the mountainside, and if the old man was coming, I had the advantage because I was up above him. To get me, he would have to come up a steep hill, and that might not be so easy after stopping a few 33 bullets. I had made up my mind this was my last chance. This would be a fight to the finish. I rested here for 2 hours. It was 3 p.m. When I started down the mountainside, it was nice going, but too steep and not too much undergrowth. Not too steep and not too much undergrowth. When I got near the bottom, I shot one big blue grouse. She was sitting on the windfall looking right at me, only 100 feet away. I shot her neck right off. I made it down the creek at the bottom of this canyon. I felt I was safe now. I made a fire between 2 big boulders and roasted the grouse. The next morning when I woke up, I was feeling terrible. My feet were sore from dirty socks. My legs were sore. My stomach was upset from the grouse that I ate the night before. I was not too sure I was going to make it up the mountain. I finally made the top, but it took me 6 hours to get there, and it was cloudy visibility about a mile. I knew I had to go downhill. After about 2 hours, I got down to heavy timber and sat down to rest. I could hear a motor running hard at times, then stop. I listened to see for a while and decided the sound was from a gas donkey. Someone was logging in the neighborhood. I told them I was a prospector and lost. I didn't like to tell them I had been kidnapped by Sasquatch, as if I had told them, they would probably have said he was too crazy, or crazy too, excuse me. The following day I went down from this camp on Salmon Arm branch of Sechelt Inlet. From there I got the Union boat back to Vancouver. That was my last prospecting trip. I had my own experience with what is known as a Sasquatch. I know that in 1924 there were 4 Sasquatch living. It might be only 2 now. The old man and the old lady might be dead by this time. And that's the end of it. From Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us by John Green, 1974 BC, Canada, Hancock House. And then we got a couple videos here. Sasquatch story, Albert Ostman's kidnapping.
Squatch. Albert Ostman lived fairly close to my home, and I got to know him very well. I've interviewed him numerous times. Squatch. Albert Ostman lived fairly close to my home, and I got to know him very well. I've interviewed him numerous times.
John Green is a retired Canadian journalist and a leading researcher into the Bigfoot phenomenon. He is a graduate of both the University of British Columbia and Columbia University, and has a database of more than 3,000 sighting and track reports, earning him the nickname Mr. Sasquatch. While researching his book Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us, Green interviewed Canadian outdoorsman Albert Ostman, recording his detailed and strange account. Ostman claimed he was kidnapped and held captive by a family of Sasquatch in 1924 while he was prospecting in British Columbia, Canada. This is the actual audio recording of Ostman's account made in 1966.
I was out on a prospecting trip. I was in, I think it was about 6 or 7 days. Then I was camping at the place there. And they began to bother me at night there. I thought first there would be porcupines or probably bear or something, but evidently it was something else. And that went on for about 3-4 nights. And finally one night I was picked up in my sleep and carried away. He carried me for, I don't know, probably 3-4 hours. Then I was let down in a valley where, of course, it was dark, you know. I heard a lot of chatter around. It's a little after 4 o'clock in the morning when he let me down.
Ostman claimed the creature carried him in a sleeping bag, which also contained food supplies and his rifle. Ostman didn't feel threatened by the strange creatures, but he also didn't feel free to leave, so he settled in and made his own camp.
Finally, when it got lighter, I noticed these people around me, 4 of them, 2 big ones and 2 small ones, but they were all covered with hair and no clothes. Never bothered me. Evidently they had some reason why they wanted me there. I had enough wood gathered up so I cooked coffee. And I guess the aroma from that brought him near, and he was sitting about 10 feet away from me when I was drinking my coffee. And then I opened a box of snuff, you see, and when I opened that and took a pinch, you know, he reached out for it, you know, and he emptied it right in his mouth, and he swallowed it. And that didn't feel very good, taste very good, I guess. So, and then he had to have something to drink, I guess. So he grabbed that and he drank the coffee can, ground and all.
As a result of the snuff and the coffee, the beast ran off, likely looking for water. That's when Ostman made his escape.
It's not a story that anybody would be inclined to believe today. The problem is that the descriptions that he gave of these individuals have been consistently supported throughout the years by subsequent observations.
Yeah, so what do you do about that?
Today I want to talk a little bit about Albert Ostman. I've read a lot about him, and I think there are really compelling parts of his story that are always overlooked. But in case you're unfamiliar with Ostman, here's a condensed version. So Ostman was a logger, trapper, and prospector. He was born in 1893 and died at the age of 82. He took some time to pan for gold in the Toba Inlet, Canada, in the year 1924. He was warned by the local Klahoose tribe that the particular area he was heading for was home to mountain devils. Ostman ignored the warning and proceeded on his prospecting trip. Not long after setting up camp, it became evident that he had some kind of nocturnal visitor. He suspected it was either bear or porcupine. But on the fourth day at his camp, it became clear that the visitors were something else entirely. He made the incredible claim that he was picked up in a sleeping bag and carried miles over the span of several hours. After he was discarded and the sun rose, he saw his abductors were none other than the mountain devils which he was warned about by the Klahoose tribe. He said that he didn't feel particularly threatened by the individuals, but he also felt he was not, quote, free to leave, as one Bigfoot was always there to watch him. After cohabitating with the troop of Sasquatch for a shocking 6 days, he made his escape by offering the sentinel Sasquatch chewing tobacco. Ostman claims that the Bigfoot tried to get the snuff out of his mouth by washing it down with coffee that Ostman had made. This caused the creature to search for water, and that's how Ostman made his escape. Now, Ostman's story is pretty hard to swallow for even the most die-hard believers, but there are some points that are overlooked that I find remarkably credible. In his recounting of events to author and investigator John Green, he said that there were 2 big ones and 2 smaller ones, a mother, father, sister, and brother. He described them all as having wide jaws and a narrow forehead that slanted upward round at the back about 5 or 6 inches higher than the forehead. This is what primatologists and anthropologists call today a sagittal crest. It is extremely compelling that Ostman could describe a sagittal crest in the early 1900s, seeing as the extent of ape photography was much like this, and popular culture depicted apes like this. Neither depicts or emphasizes a sagittal crest. Ostman also said that the, quote, old man's eye teeth, or the adult male incisors, were much longer than the rest of the teeth, but not quite tusks, which is true in apes and to a lesser extent you and I. He said that the juveniles, or as he put it, the young fellow and the girl, were a bit over 6 feet tall and extremely agile. He said that as long as there was room for their big toe, they could grapple any tree or cliff. The adult female, or old lady, as he put it, was described differently. He said she was, quote, not built for beauty or speed, which sounds familiar to me. He said that she had very wide hips and a goose-like walk. Ostman also said they slept underneath a rock ledge that had loosely woven cedar and moss, not unlike primates today. He also described a game that the young fellow played. He said the young fellow would balance on his back while holding his feet in his hands, and then see how far he can propel himself with his rear. All primates play games, as we know. The famed cryptozoologist Ivan T. Sanderson interviewed Ostman and sketched one of the creatures. The sketch can be seen here, though Ostman said that only the females had the updo with their hair. Sanderson was impressed by the remarkable consistency of Ostman's story. Skeptics and researchers point out red flags in Ostman's story. For example, Ostman claimed that the Bigfoot brought his knapsack full of gear with him. But is that really so unlikely? I mean, to assume Bigfoot exists is to assume that they are extremely intelligent. They obviously are, or we would have found one by now. Maybe the Bigfoot knew that humans can't survive without the items they bring with them into the forest. People argue that surely the Bigfoot would have caught up with Ostman while he was making his give-or-take 25-mile escape. Well, maybe they let him go. Being choked half to death with snuff is a good indicator that things aren't really working out. And if the Bigfoot wanted to hurt Ostman in the first place, we never even would have heard of him. He would just be another person who went into the woods and never came out. As incredible as the story appears, there are equally credible reasons to believe it. Primates kidnapping humans is well documented. Notably a baboon in South Africa that abducted an infant in 2002. I mean, To assume that Bigfoot exists at all is to function under the presumption that things like this must happen. Pretend for a moment that Sasquatch are more human-like than ape-like, then consider that, sadly, humans kidnap other humans all the time. We even kidnap other primates. Perhaps the Bigfoot troop was desperate to find the female a mate that was outside the bloodline. Either way, Police Magistrate A.M. Naismith wrote in a sworn affidavit that Ostman is a man of, quote, full mental capacity. Police Magistrate Naismith was, quote, unable to find a flaw in his character, nor a flaw in his story. Ostman also signed a solemn declaration which essentially made his story a legal matter under penalty of perjury under the Canadian Evidence Act. As noted in Mr. Hunter's book, The Search for North America's Incredible Creature, a man once accused Ostman's story of being made up. And Ostman said, I don't give a damn what you think. But now it's your turn. I want to know what you think. And remember, you can support your opinion without attacking anyone else's. And thanks a lot for listening.
You're going to try. Go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind.
Don't know, you should take it slow. Are you searching?